Okay, so there's two ideas I've seen out there for the Indianapolis Colts on the defensive side of the football in the past few days. And of course, defense up to this point in the offseason has been the focal point of what it is that we've been talking about, primarily because we hired Lou Anarumo. We know that we are overhauling that side of the ball. And we also know at this juncture, it seems that all options are on the table. Like, we have very little clarity right now as to what it is that we can expect from the Indianapolis Colts in terms of transactions over the course of the next month or two. So in the meantime, this is what we do, right? We speculate, we wonder. We live in the land of make-believe, but that's okay, right? We fantasize all the time as Colts fans. There's no crime in that. The Super Bowl coming up this Sunday, we fantasize of a day that one day we might make it back. We fantasize about the idea of having a franchise quarterback that can stay healthy. We fantasize about all types of things, okay? So the two ideas are as followed. Number one, I saw Dre Greenlaw, 49ers linebacker, is about to be a free agent. Mason Cameron of Pro Football Focus listed the Colts as one of two potential landing spots for Dre Greenlaw, at least ones I guess that he views make sense for Dre Greenlaw in free agency. And then the next suggested idea is trading for Myles Garrett by Greg Doyle of the Indy Star. And he even gave pieces that he thought would make sense in said trade. Now, one of these ideas is more likely than the other, and I'll let you kind of use your critical thinking skills to figure out which one that might be. But we're, of course, going to go over my thoughts on these ideas, the likelihood that they happen, and perhaps even the implications that they would have on the Indianapolis Colts if they did happen. But before we do, you know what it is? I got to introduce myself. My name is Justin. This right here is the Behind the Bench Colts podcast. As always, ask anyone watching on YouTube and enjoying the show, go ahead, shoot a like. It's going to help me get out to as many Colts fans as humanly possible. Of course, subscribe if you want to be a part of the journey. We're trying to get to 4,000 subscribers on YouTube by the start of next season. We are nowhere close. I don't know who's closer, the Colts to being in a Super Bowl or us to 4,000. Probably us to 4,000. But nonetheless, if you're a sorry bastard like me and you enjoy the Colts, perhaps you'd like what you're hearing or don't want to miss what we're doing over here in the future, maybe today's the day you subscribe. Audio listeners, leave that 5-star review. Let the people know how much you like the show. I mean, who would want to listen to anyone other than this beautiful, non-annoying voice on their way to work in the morning? That's what the audio side is for. YouTube has the video component. Of course, we don't watch things while we drive because that would be dangerous to everyone around us. That's where the audio version comes in. We're trying to get that out to more people. But now that we've gotten the housekeeping out of the way, of course, we're going to get back into the content of the episode, and we're going to start with Dre Greenlaw. Actually, before we even get into the players themselves, sorry, I'm stalling, but let's just lay out the reality of the situation out there because it actually applies to both the idea of Dre Greenlaw and Myles Garrett, so it's only fitting that we would mention it first, and it is this. The primary issue that the Indianapolis Colts are going to face from a player acquisition standpoint is how do the players that the Colts are looking to bring in view the Colts as an organization, both in terms of where the team is headed in terms of winning, and if they, the player, can expect things to be the same in 1 to 2 years' time. And by that, I mean, if you're the player, you're looking at the Colts and you're asking yourself, if I'm to sign a contract here, if I'm to potentially move my family here, if I'm to put my eggs in this basket, what is the likelihood that the guy or the guys that brought me into this organization are still going to be here in 1 to 2 years? And if they're not, how does that affect my job stability? And quite frankly, that is a very, very fair concern. So when you look at Dre Greenlaw, for example, he's been with the 49ers, okay? The other team, Pro Football Focus, labeled as a fit for him, as I said, I think at the top of the show, was the Detroit Lions. Well, I mean, okay, right? Let's be objective here. I know we're Colts fans, but let's be objective. Between the 49ers, perennial NFC Championship contender when they're not missing the playoffs, the Detroit Lions, who were spectacular this year, and the Indianapolis Colts as it currently stands, to quote the great children's show Sesame Street. When you look at those three things, one of these things is not like the other. One of these things doesn't belong. Right? And I've got some bad news for you. If you're looking at that and saying, yeah, the 49ers stink, the Lions and the Colts are great, I'm sorry, pal, but you kind of might be in the wrong on this one. We are the ones in that group, unfortunately, as it currently stands, that don't fit, right? We're the ones that don't belong in that group of thing. And then you look at a Myles Garrett, right? And you look at his statement, and hold on, let me put on my very real glasses that I definitely need to read, and they're certainly not a prop for the sake of the video product. I know I have it stored somewhere. Bear with me. How unprofessional by me. Hold on. Myles Garrett statement that's ridiculous. Okay, hold on. I'm sorry, guys. Bear with me. This is where most people would edit it out, right? This is where most people would edit it out, but unfortunately, I'm making you sit through it because I'm too lazy to do as such. So, with that being said, Myles Garrett's statement, okay? We got there. I'm sorry. As a kid, dreaming of the NFL, all I focused on was the ultimate goal of winning a Super Bowl, and that goal fuels me today more than ever. My love for the community of Northeast Ohio and the incredible fan base of the Cleveland Browns has made this one of the toughest decisions of my life. These past 8 years have shaped me into the man that I am today, and while I've loved calling this city my home, my desire to win and compete on the biggest stages won't allow me, being Myles Garrett, I'm Myles Garrett, if you can't tell. I mean, look at me. I look exactly like him. Won't allow me to be complacent. The goal was never to go from Cleveland to Canton. It has always been to compete for and win a Super Bowl. With that in mind, I have requested a trade from the Cleveland Browns. Well, okay. Now, I'll tell you what. I'm no scholar, okay? I'm not. I know some of you guys may think I am. I'm really not. But what part of the statement that I just read from Myles Garrett requesting to be traded from the Cleveland Browns says to you, yeah, I'm down to get traded to the damn Colts? And I don't mean any disrespect, because this is one of those episodes where I come along and I sound like I'm all negative Nancy and I'm not on the Colts side here. I am on the Colts side. But at the same time, the job here is to be objective in the analysis of the team. And I certainly don't think we're amongst the worst teams in all of football. But ain't no one accusing us of being a team that you look at right now and says, yep, that's a winning football team, and we're 100% sure that organization is going in the right direction. That is not the situation that the Colts are in. And make no mistake, if you're the Cleveland Browns, you are going to try to do right by Myles Garrett. Like, with what he has sacrificed for the cause, the loyalty he's shown up to this point, because he had plenty of opportunities to request a trade up to now. And of course, the way it would reflect on them as an organization if they traded him to some sort of bum squad. If you're the Browns, you want to save some sort of face after paying Deshaun Watson and all the opinions that people have of you. You don't exactly have a great reputation yourselves. You're likely going to trade Myles Garrett to a good team, and ideally, in a perfect world, a team that is not in the same conference as you, although technically that is not a requirement. Now, all of that being said, everything I just said about the Indianapolis Colts and the questions you have about their future, and if you're a player, are you sure you want to come play for the Colts? All of that being said, it does not mean that either of these moves are impossible. So then the question becomes after that, how do I feel about the possibility of acquiring either of those two players? Well, okay. Now here's where we start with Dre Greenlaw, right? This is where I was 5 minutes ago. In short, let me just say, when it comes to Dre Greenlaw, I love that move. Love may be strong. I really, really like that move. I couldn't possibly, if they got him, criticize that move. But at the same time, it would not be a move that comes without questions. Like, how do you feel about that move? Obviously, well, let me not say obviously. You're not a Niners fan, so maybe you wouldn't know. Dre Greenlaw is coming off a torn Achilles. Obviously, one of the toughest injuries to come back from in the game. Now, we've seen that kind of get shifted on its head a little bit in the past couple years with guys like Aaron Rodgers and I think J.K. Dobbins, and even Adayo Dangbo I thought came back pretty well from it, right? But one of the things we love about a Dre Greenlaw, and people around the league love about Dre Greenlaw as a linebacker, is his ability in pass coverage. So when you take into account something like that requires covering a lot of ground, how easy will it be for Dre Greenlaw to come back and do that at the same level? I'm talking about play in pass coverage at the same level he did prior to the Achilles. I'm not entirely sure. But one thing I do know is that I've been very vocal about the fact that I don't like the idea that the Colts continuously invest into people that have an injury history. I mean, whether it's drafting Laitu Latu with the neck, which overall seemingly doesn't seem like it's a lingering issue into the league, Julian Blackman, Juju Brents, Matt Goncalves, Tyquan Lewis, Kamiko Ture, how about that? Ben Banogu, how about that? Remember that name? These are just guys who they've drafted out of college who have had injury concerns, let alone the ones that they've invested in or have been invested in that kind of pick up the injury bug as a pro. So if you're the Colts and your biggest offseason signing, and make no mistake, if they got Dre Greenlaw, it wouldn't get much better than that from a name perspective. If your biggest offseason signing as a free agent is coming off an Achilles injury, well, based off of some of the things that I've voiced as frustrations in the past, not exactly wonderful from that perspective. So that would be a question you have. And then I can also look at the criticisms that a lot of Colts fans have about this defense as it's currently structured, where a lot of you guys are saying, hey, this is one thing I heard throughout the season all the time. We have a defense filled with mid-round talents, and they're playing like it. Well, okay. Do you like the idea of bringing in Dre Greenlaw? That's my question, because he was drafted in the 5th round. So if you do like the idea of bringing in Dre Greenlaw, then I suppose, you have a bit of a conflict, right? Because you're going to have to do one of two things. Number one, if you're going to like that move, but also say that about the guys that we currently have, you're going to have to either rethink the way that you feel about him because he's a mid-rounder, or number two, and is the more reasonable approach, of course, I'm trying to lead you to victory, don't worry. You're going to have to admit the fact that perhaps your premise was a little bit cheap to begin with and really just kind of a convenient low blow when you're upset about the team's performance. Now, all of that being said, SpotRack, which is where I go for market values. I don't know how to calculate market values, but they do have a setting on that website. You can go in, look at free agents, all that stuff, okay? They said the current market value for a Dre Greenlaw is $6.7 million, and they reference players like Marcus Davenport, Ashawn Robinson, Devondre Campbell, Jelani Tavai, all as guys who kind of got contracts in that range. They're comparing him to those players. Well, okay. Let's say we had to overpay him a little bit because we're the Colts, and maybe he has the option to go to the Lions for $6.7 million, or he has the option to go to the Colts for $7 or $8 million, okay? And he decides to go for the Colts. Do I like the idea of $7 to $8 million on a one-year deal for Dre Greenlaw, who was kind of ascending into being one of the better linebackers in football pre-injury? Do I like a one-year prove-it deal for that price? Yeah, I mean, you got to like the risk to reward, if you ask me. So that overall is how I feel about the Dre Greenlaw idea. Thumbs up on that signing from me. Certainly couldn't complain. Now, for Myles Garrett, here's what Greg Doyle proposes. Okay. I'm going to quote him, okay? This is what he wrote. Maybe there are teams in the NFL who look at Richardson, still just 22 years old, still 6'4", still the fastest player on the field, now closer to 260 pounds, and see a beautiful puzzle that the Colts couldn't solve. Maybe the Browns are one of those teams. Why would Cleveland make this trade? Well, first of all, the Colts would need to sweeten the pot with more than Richardson. So right off the bat, he's suggesting Anthony Richardson be involved in the trade, and then maybe send the Browns a defensive end to replace Garrett on the depth chart, if not the NFL sack leaderboard. Maybe 50-year pro, Kwity Paye, maybe Laitu Latu, the first defensive player taken in the NFL draft, maybe both of them. So this is Greg Doyle's idea. One, right off the bat, we're not going to hold our breath on the idea of the Colts getting Myles Garrett. There is next to no shot in hell that happens, okay? Period. That is likely not going to happen. And two, if it were to happen, on our last 2 first-rounders, one of which being a guy that we still are trying to hold out some hope for to be the franchise quarterback, doesn't that sound a little bit steep for a guy in Myles Garrett right now? We know how great he is. We know Myles Garrett is one of the best defensive players this league has seen in the past decade. We understand all of that. But wouldn't the beauty of bringing in a Myles Garrett be the idea of pairing him with a Laitu Latu and kind of watching that tandem grow? So I don't love that part of it in the suggestion from Greg Doyle. But the idea of saying, if you're the Indianapolis Colts, okay, here's Kwity Paye, or Samson Ebukam. Kwity Paye on a 5th-year option and Samson Ebukam going into a contract year. So both of them essentially after this year are not under contract with the Indianapolis Colts. You say, okay, either one or both of those guys, maybe a future pick, a combo of future picks, any combination of the things I just listed. Do I like the idea of that? For a Myles Garrett who just turned 29 in December, probably has 3 to 5 years of high-level football left. I mean, I would not hate that. Like, I couldn't possibly sit there and say, oh, man, the Colts got Myles Garrett. That fucking sucks. Like, I mean, there would be no world where I could reasonably say that. Like, the idea of Myles Garrett, DeForest Buckner, Grover Stewart, Laitu Latu. I mean, you want to talk about a unit that would make headlines across the league in terms of offseason hype? That's it right there. Like, that's fun stuff. That would be really fun stuff. But on the other hand, you would have the idea, okay, you'd be losing either Ebukam, Kwity Paye, or both in a potential trade for him, and the possibility of Dio Ndangba walking in free agency himself. All the depth that the Colts have had and built on this unit would be gone. So is that worth it? I'm not too sure, to be 100% honest with you, particularly when you look at a team in the Indianapolis Colts who seemingly always gets injuries. And it's not that they're more injured than other teams. It's just the fact that, like, they just get them, like, to the worst players, right? Like, the guys that get hurt on the Colts, you never see, like, some fucking 4th-string corner get hurt on the Indianapolis Colts, all right? Like, it's always a critical piece to the puzzle that year. Like, that's just how it goes. It's the nature of being a Colts fan. So, with that being said, would I like the idea of gutting our depth for the idea of the upside of Myles Garrett? I mean, maybe, but we'd have to be, well, actually, yes. Let me say yes. If I'm the GM, yes. But do I think we'd be proactive enough to ensure that we have the depth behind him? That's where I think maybe we'd be risking falling a little bit short. So overall, I'm not entirely sure how I feel about the move, but, I guess I would be leaning towards fine, even though it's not going to happen. So, like, what's even the point of really having an opinion? But again, that's where we're at in the offseason. It's what we do. How do you feel about those moves? I'm curious to hear your thoughts. I've shared mine, but that right there was an entire episode. Congratulations, you made it to the end. Like, subscribe, 5-star review, all 3 of them, whatever you want to do. This would be the time because we're about to sign off. My name is Justin. This right here was the Ride the Bench Colts podcast. And as always, go Colts.